Thank you for listening to this Podcast One production. Now available on Apple Podcasts, Podcast One, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
The following episode of Killer Genes contains graphic and sensitive information and material. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Killer Genes Stripped Down, where we talk about everything true crime and then some.
You'll hear about the cases that are close to us and go behind the scenes of true crime reporting.
We'll also talk about case updates and breaking news, as well as speak with some of our friends and colleagues in the world of true crime.
Now, we're going to be sharing things we've never been able to talk about because certainly inappropriate to post online, but this is the platform that we can finally share it, what really happens when gathering true crime stories.
So, let's get to it. So we're joined now by author, homicide expert, law enforcement trainer, and host of the hit podcast, Where the Bodies Are Buried, Phil Chalmers. Phil, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you guys.
Congratulations on all the success with your podcast and your books. He's written Inside the Mind of a Teen Killer and literally the encyclopedia of teen killers.
And Where the Bodies Are Buried, just a lot of great reviews on that. Congrats.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was ranked number 21 of the top 50 new podcasts, so we're excited.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, the biggest question is how did you even get involved with specializing in teen killers and serial killers?
People ask me, they're like, how do I do what you do? And I'm like, man, if you know how I got here. It's not something I decided I was going to do. It goes way back to when I was little. Like, I was raised in a very dangerous neighborhood on inner city Cleveland, Ohio. I was raised by a violent alcoholic father and a very dysfunctional home. A lot of that leads me to where I am today. So I grow up, I'm robbed. If they break into our house at night, I'm robbed on the way to school. Just lots of bizarre things happen with my father, my family. And a lot of that will later on influence what I do for a living. So I got a lucky break to get out of the urban area, the really violent inner city of Cleveland. We moved when I was 10 years old. So I got to experience a little bit of the normal life of the suburbs. But I never forgot where I came from. And when I turned 18, I went to college for a couple years, and I realized that this is not what I want to do. So I decided to start working with troubled kids. And in Cleveland, I was working with teenage rapists and teenage killers. And that led to me speaking to teens across the country. And being a youth expert, I decided I want to start interviewing teen killers. So in 1985, my very first interview was a kid named Sean Sellers, one of the early satanic teen killers. I mean, he killed 2 people or 3 people with a cooling off period. So he really was a serial killer, but he was only 16. And he was given the death penalty, executed in Oklahoma. And after that first interview, soon after that, I interviewed David, son of Sam Berkowitz. And at that point, I decided this is what I want to do. I want to interview as many offenders as I can and take this information and use it to help others stop these heinous acts from happening. So that's what I've been doing for 36 years.
How did you get the son of Sam to choose you? I'm sure there are many requests coming his way.
There's a letter that I've concocted that I've used for years that I send to these inmates. And, you've got one shot with an inmate when they receive their letter, and they're either going to write it back or not. And to me, I'm just upfront and honest with who I am. I mean, they could Google me, so I really can't say, I can't use my name and not make up something. But I'm pretty open about who I am and what I'm doing. And I always offer to help. If they help me, I'll help them. And inmates always need help. So if you're willing to help an inmate, sometimes, most of the times, they'll work with you.
And one other thing that you do that is so admirable is you go around to middle schools and high schools around the country speaking on bullying. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for many years, I would say from 1985 till about 2010, maybe 2015, I spoke at schools and I did school assemblies. I don't do it anymore because I'm so slammed with the other things I'm doing. But yeah, I gave it everything I had to go to every school I could and address the entire school population in gymnasium about the dangers of bullying. I would actually show them some crime scene photos, talk about school shootings. And I know for a fact that we did stop many school shootings. We did save a lot of kids that were thinking of suicide. And, that was very rewarding. But now I kind of focus my attention on the adult killers and unsolved murders. And that's what I'm working on right now.
And you also train law enforcement. What do those training seminars look like?
Yeah, if you've ever seen the show Mindhunter on Netflix, that's basically who I am and what I do. So I go to these death rows and these prisons. I interview these inmates. I find out what makes them tick. I get as much information as I can. And just like the show Mindhunter, I then take the show on the road and I train, law enforcement, all different aspects of law enforcement nationwide. Like I just got back yesterday from Savannah, Georgia. I trained 550 gang investigators. And so I speak at all these conferences. And my course is called Profiling Teen Killers, School Shooters, Mass Murderers, and Serial Killers. And I teach my audience how to spot these offenders, by the warning signs, the causes, the triggers. And that's what we do, and it's going very well.
So when it comes to minors, which is the focus of today, I know there are distinctive specific reasons why women kill, men kill, but what did you find, if any common theme or reason for minors who end up murdering someone? Is there a running theme at all?
Oh, of course. I've kind of established the 13 causes of why kids kill. I've established dozens of warning signs that adults should be looking for. And then I've come up with 6 triggers. So in my research, it takes like at least 3 to 6 causes of a teen killer. So in other words, people say, like, what if you play violent video games? Well, that's one. If you play violent video games and you're in a nice home and it's a stable family and everything else is good, you're probably okay. But when you start stacking up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it becomes dangerous. And then after you have a kid who has 3 to 6 causes, you've got to watch for the warning signs. And I give people those warning signs. At the end of the day, it takes a trigger. Teenagers don't kill without a trigger. Something has to happen to them to have a trigger. And that's what I train. And a lot of the experts appreciate what I'm doing.
And what I found also when interviewing killers as well is it's more so, it could be physical, it could be mental, it could be emotional, not all 3, but 1 or 2 of the 3, I've talked to people who were triggered from just mental and emotional abuse. And then others, it was just more devastating than that. What specifically do you think is the triggering cause of young people to snap? And also, do you feel like their minds not being fully developed come into play as well? Like maybe lack of education, lack of seeing a bigger picture?
Well, the warnings, we kind of start back to the causes, like why. Obviously the number one cause, the top two causes is dysfunction in the home, which could be any kind of abuse. Or it could be, we see a big connection with no father, like the missing the father connection. That's a big one. But, drugs, gangs, mental illness, bullying, abuse, there's all kind of things there that are causes of teen murder. And the warning signs are how do kids display this potential of killing. Everybody knows about killing animals, wetting the bed, setting fires, but, just threats of murder, fascination with violence and murder and death. Drawings, posting photos on social media, fascination with guns, fascination with deadly weapons, fascination, there's a lot of things like that. And then at the end of the day, it takes a trigger. The number one trigger of school shootings is bullying, and it has always been. But, a breakup with the boyfriend or girlfriend, mom and dad saying you can't date someone. A major bullying incident at school is a biggie. Mom and dad having really a dispute over curfew, cell phones, something at home. Sometimes we think, they had a fight over video games, but that could be like the ultimate trigger of violence. But each kid's different, but we kind of narrowed it down. We kind of see a pattern, and that's what I share with the audience that I train.
If you have to put a number on it, how many teen killers have you spoken with, and how many adult serial killers have you spoken with?
I would say I've interviewed well into 200 to 300 teen killers. I interviewed at least 200 for the book I wrote in 2009. So I'd say at least 250 to 300 by now. we are probably on track over 200 serial killers. So we're nearing over 500 interviews with violent offenders.
Can you tell me, is there a particular case or two, whether teenagers or adults, that interview or the crime really stuck with you for whatever reason?
You know, the teen killer crimes and the school shooter crimes are all very similar. They don't really stand out to me. The way I explain this to people is, you know, if you just walk up and shoot someone, there's really not much to that crime. But anything that involves kidnapping, torture, you know, any kind of graphic rape, sex with the dead, you know, eating people, you know, cannibalism, those are the kind of things that really stand out to me. But there's two different types of crimes that I really talk about, the teen killers and the serial killers. So the teen killers, the one that really stands out to me is a kid named Robert Bever. He was from Oklahoma, and he stabbed his whole family to death. Now, he was explaining this to us. It was pretty chilling. Like, he was stabbing his entire family. And as he was doing that, you know, he couldn't believe they weren't dying right away. And they were bleeding profusely. They were screaming. And he said, I just wanted to scream and stop. It was an amazing interview I did with that kid. And it was kind of haunting that he was stabbing everybody that he loved, trying to get them to stop screaming. That stuck with me.
Do you feel like the younger people don't realize the scope of what they're doing? Because you mentioned a solid point. Adults who kill it, some of them drag it out and they want it to last a while. Whereas younger people maybe do something and it's over quick and easy. But do you think they even fully register the scope of human life being taken by them and punishment to come after?
No, I don't think they know. And that's why I'm a little more patient with them than I am the adults, because their brains aren't fully developed till at least they're 22 to 25. So they don't think of consequences, and they really don't have a fully developed adult brain. It doesn't mean we let them free, but it does. You know, I understand where they're coming from. When those kids go off to prison and they spend a few years in prison, they're completely different people. I talk a lot to Charles Andy Williams, the school shooter from Santana, California. And he's going to be paroled in a couple of years, and we're really pretty close. And he'll get out and he'll do well. He's married. He's going to be a drug counselor. You know, it doesn't mean that it's okay what he did, but you're that young. You're 15 years old. You're not, you know, you don't even know what you're doing, basically, in some ways. Where the adults definitely do. And people ask me, can these killers be rehabilitated? I think if you are a teenager and you kill your bully, you kill your molester, or, you know, something like that, or you're involved you're in a vehicle where someone gets killed, I think you can be rehabilitated. But anybody that's involved in torture, rape, sodomy, kidnapping, cannibalism, necrophilia, I don't think those people can be rehabilitated. I don't think they should ever be released. So as far as an adult case, there's a lot of adult cases that get me. There's a lot of people I interviewed that like to have sex with people when they're dead. A lot of interviews where people eat, they actually eat people, they eat their victims. Anything like that really sticks with me, and those are some of the worst interviews that I do.
If you are feeling depressed or struggling with uncertainty or having difficulty sleeping, BetterHelp offers experienced therapists who can listen and help. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional, and you can start communicating in under 48 hours.
Now, it's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online. There's a broad range of expertise available, which may not be locally available in your area. The service is available, though, for clients worldwide, and you can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor.
You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy. You know, BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches so they can match it easy and free to change counselors if needed.
And the best part is it's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and they even have financial aid available. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are now recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states.
Killer Genes is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy, and our listeners get 10% off their first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/Killer Genes.
That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Killer Genes. Get matched with a BetterHelp therapist and get started today. Is there one particular person that scared you?
You know, I'm not really scared by killers or inmates. You know, I've been threatened by people who said they had people on the outside that could kill me and this kind of thing. That's happened occasionally. When you deal with these psychopaths, it's going to happen. But the one guy that's the creepiest, and he stands out of all the inmates, the killers, he's the werewolf butcher, and his name's Jack Spillman. And he was a child molester, and he committed some really heinous murders. And he staged the scenes to shock the first responders, cutting off breasts, inserting baseball bats in the body cavities. And he was a really, you can actually Google his crime scenes. They're really graphic. But he was probably the creepiest that I've ever interviewed. He's like totally off the wall, mentally challenged, crazy. And that was probably the craziest thing I've ever done. Jack Spillman.
Now I have to ask Melissa, what was one of your most memorable cases in dealing with a serial killer or a teen killer?
It was a teenager. So it was 2009. I know you're familiar with this one. In St. Martin's, Missouri, it was Alyssa Bustamante, and her victim was Elizabeth Olton, 9 years old. Alyssa was 15 years old. And just to paint a picture for people listening is Elizabeth Olton, the victim, was the neighbor. And this was a confessed, basically, thrill kill. And there was a premeditation. She thought about it. She dug up graves for a small person's body days in advance, multiple graves. She bragged about it in her diary. She had all the signs of an absolute sociopath at such a young age. And also she had some of the signs you discussed: trauma in the family, dad was in jail, mom was a drug addict living with grandma. But what was so chilling to me was she used the killer, Alyssa Bustamante, used her little sister to unknowingly help her. She said, hey, go get the neighbor, Elizabeth, I want to show her something. So her little sister has to grow up knowing that she walked this young girl to her older sister. And then Alyssa held her hand, little Elizabeth, and in the details of it and visualizing it as I'm interviewing her mom. And by the way, Phil, this was one of the only stories where normally you have to be strong and try not to cry. But when I was interviewing Elizabeth's mom, I completely lost it. I mean, we had to stop rolling because she was, hysterical. I was having a tough time. I was crying. It was so horrific, the visualization, that it was just, I could not hold it in, my tears. It was so horrific. And I just picture Alyssa holding this young girl's hand and walking her about 15 minutes into the woods to say, oh no, this will be great. I want to show you something. And, with a kitchen knife behind her back, and to do the horrific things that she did and to laugh about it and say, better go off to church now. Ha ha ha. It was just, how does someone get like that at 15? And how does someone want to see what it's like to kill someone at 15?
I'm very familiar with that case. I cover that case every day I speak. It's a new trend of female teen killers. 90% of killers are male, but we have seen a little uptick of female teen killers recently. We just had a female school shooter, a 6th grade female school shooter. Alyssa Bustamante, although she was kind of cute and kind of a good-looking young lady, but she also was a little strange. We knew she came from a troubled home. Dad was in prison, I think. Mom's on drugs, and she ends up living with grandma. There was all kind of warning signs on. This is where I trained my people. She had posted pictures of trying to stab classmates in the school cafeteria. She posted pictures putting a gun to her head, blood dripping out of her mouth. She's a cutter, all this kind of thing. And when people don't know the warning signs, these kids slip through the cracks, and she did. And unfortunately, a beautiful young girl paid a dear price for this. And I'll say this to you guys. People say they're fans of true crime. I never say I'm a fan of true crime. I'm interested in true crime, but there's no way I'm a fan of little kids being murdered. I mean, I'm not a fan of that.
Agree. And it's a very uncomfortable position to be in because we are the storytellers. You know, the three of us go out and we get this story. We bring this real life trauma from every viewpoint, from the convicted to the victims. And it is tough to be a part of something where there is a fandemonium, and we get it, but we just wish we respect it and get it. We just wish it wasn't that tied to that name, you know, and that,
exactly.
I don't know. It's just,
well, even using the term true crime. I understand you can be a fan of fictional crime, like some of the some of the series on networks. You know, I get that, but to say, you know, even saying we work in true crime, I usually have a hard time saying that. You know, because it's like, well, of course it's true crime. Of course it's true. You know, it's not like we're sitting here making up these stories.
We're all and I'm not bashing in any way. We're all intrigued. We're all fascinated. It's a life. It's a learning lessons in some regards. What would I do? Would I ever find myself in that situation? I just wish it was called something different and treated differently. Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with working in true crime like we all do, but I see people say I'm a fan of this. Well, like I just never say that myself. Like I'm not a fan of what these crimes are. I'm interested in it. I'm intrigued in it, and we all work in this business. But yeah, we have a reason we do what we do. And a lot of people make jokes about it. They post memes about it. I just don't do that. But this is a really disturbing case, just like you said, Melissa, but there's a beautiful little girl whose life was taken. I mean, that's a horrible tragedy. After Alyssa killed this little girl, she went back to her house, opened up her religious journal, and started journaling, I just effing killed someone. I strangled them, slit their throats, stabbed them, and now they're dead. I don't know how to feel, but she said, I don't know how to feel. It was amazing. As soon as you get over this, oh my God, I can't do this feeling. It's enjoyable. And it's amazing. She enjoyed what she did, that thrill killing. She lured that little girl out of the woods, quickly killed her and buried her. And the crime scenes are horrific. And I've never spoken to Alyssa. I did watch her interview, and she looked very normal, church-going kid. But
let me interject there, because that's interesting. I'm sure you've reached out, as did I, twice, and it was a little odd because these inmates have access to their own email system, right? And they have their passcodes and everything. Well, I received 2 responses, and it was from a girl that I believe was Alyssa, but she was saying, "Hey, this is Alyssa's friend. Alyssa is in the hole right now. Please send comic books." And then the second time was, "Hey," literally copy paste, "Hey, she's in the hole right now. This is her friend checking her emails. She can't talk. She's in the hole. Please send comic books." And I thought that's bizarre, and I feel like it's her.
It was her. Yeah, it was her. We get that a lot too, where an inmate doesn't want to talk to me, like a serial killer, and they'll have another inmate message me. Well, if that happens, it has to be, you'll see it's another inmate's account. There's no way they're using someone else's account. So it was probably her. She has responded and talked to some people. She has, I've seen some of her emails to men, or her messages, her letters to men. They're very graphic sexually. But she's never responded to me. I know she wants out of prison, like many do. And she's real guarded about who she responds to. But yeah, that case there's dozens of cases just like Alyssa's case, and it's the new trend I talk about, where we now have a female suicide problem, where female suicide, according to CDC, just doubled over the last 8 years. When you have an increase in suicide, you also have an increase in homicide. So we're going to see a lot more female teen murders, and we just saw a female school shooting.
Phil, one of the ones that personally has stuck with me is one that you and I had done together, and that is of Rod Farrell, who claimed to be a 500-year-old vampire named Vasago. Did I pronounce that right?
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah.
Yep.
And he killed an elderly couple in Florida very violently, and then went on a road trip with his friends. And, there was something very disturbing for me when I corresponded with him. Just a disconnect, I think. And you've spoken to Rod in the past. What's your take on him?
Well, I mean, he's very typical of a young teenager who's exploring death and violence, and he's playing a game called Vampire the Masquerade, watching some of these vampire movies, and he decides he's a vampire. He's a leader, so he gets a few kids on board to be in this little gang they have, right? They go down to, they're called the vampire clan, and they go down and commit a murder. And we've seen this a lot back in the 80s and 90s, where these kids, they kill someone. It's the same thing we're saying. Like, these kids don't even know what they're doing. They don't know, what the consequences are, but they kill. And I've seen the crime scene. It's a very violent crime. He kills one of his female friends' parents. I think he uses a crowbar. It's a very violent crime. And we have spoken to Rod quite a bit. He is definitely kind of a different person today. He kind of says he doesn't believe anything that he believed back in the day, but it looks like he really wanted to get out of prison, but I don't think he's going to. He's been very cordial with us, and we did that interview with him, and it's hard to say where he is today. I don't know.
Yeah, so he was actually for years he was the youngest inmate on death row in the state of Florida. And in 2000, the Florida Supreme Court reduced his sentence to just life in prison because it was declared, I don't know if it was unconstitutional or what.
Well, so the Supreme Court actually made that major ruling of teens who cannot have life sentences without the possibility of parole any longer. I have to check the year, but it was an overall ruling.
Well, he had a resentencing hearing April of last year in 2020 where the judge upheld a life sentence without parole. So he was taken off of death row, but given life without parole.
Interesting.
Wow.
So that kind of brings up our question, Phil, is do you think that teen killers should be given death or life sentence without the possibility of parole? Do you think there is room for rehabilitation in these people?
Well, the quick answer is I think teenagers should be given 25 to life and have a shot at parole after 25 years, depending on how they're doing and what their mind frame is, because, their brains were not fully developed when they committed these murders. I'm talking about kids younger than 18. They can't get the death penalty anymore. Some of the states, they can't even get life without parole. But anybody that's involved in torture, kidnapping, even rape, sodomy, any of these kind of crimes, it's a lot different than a kid being bullied and shoots a bully at school, a kid being molested and shoots his molester. That's a little different crime than you kidnap someone, you tied them up to a bed, and you tortured them for hours. I mean, that's a different crime.
You think it's case by case, not a broad stroke.
I do. And I think at least if you have it'll never be a broad stroke because every state's different. I know people that are in prison for a murder and they have life without parole. I know people that have killed 10 people and they have 20 years. I mean, there's no consistency in the justice system. But if I was making the rules, I would give every juvenile under 18 25 to life. Let them sit there for 25 years, see if they get their shit together, and then after 25 years, you take a look at their case. That's the easiest way to do it. This way you don't give them life without, and maybe they will be a productive member of society, but they'll never have a shot.
So you just talked about the young female that just shot up a school. What do you think, sorry to get on the broader scope of things, but what do you think we have to do as a society, as parents, as friends, siblings, to stop some of these mass school shootings and, public shootings that just happened in Boulder at the grocery store a few months ago in Boulder, Colorado? What has to be done?
Well, we have a major problem in this country. We have a suicide problem. And it's very hard to solve this problem. A lot of people don't want to live. And I think it was 2018. Well, we have about 36,000 gun deaths a year in the United States. And the politicians will talk about that number a lot, but 22,000 of those gun deaths are suicides. Those are people shooting themselves. So we have a major suicide problem. And until we get this handled and get people who need help, we're not going to stop these incidents, because how do you stop someone who's mentally challenged, mentally ill, and wants to go on a rampage? How do you stop them? The only thing you can do is harden your target. So you put a police officer in a school, you put a police officer in the church, put a police officer in a movie theater. That's all you really can do. You can harden the targets until we get those people help. When I was growing up, there was a mental hospital that was 3,000 patients next to where I lived in Cleveland. And we had a lot of those facilities nationwide. They've all been shut down. They've all been closed. And the mentally ill are either in prison or homeless. And we're not treating mentally ill people. But someone that says, I really need some help, they should be able to go to a facility, not be labeled, and get the help they need, and that is not available today. Until we do that, we will continue to have these heinous crimes, mass shootings, school shootings, or whatever's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about that often. I think it was like the Reagan era where all of the mental institutions just were shut down, and wow, what a blow to this day. And it's just never gotten to where it needs to be. Hopefully that will change. A lot of people are putting money and focus on it now. You know, what's interesting to me, I'm sure this has been brought up a few hundred times in your research, but I found that a lot of minors who are in for homicide, some of them get a raw deal in their legal representation, whether they don't understand or they're given a plea deal or they just aren't clear on their options. Do you find that legally a lot of teens weren't guided the way they should have been and maybe would be today with more rights and more choices?
Yeah, I mean, that happens a lot to people. These things happen really quick, right? They commit these crimes and they get arrested. And it happens so fast that some people talk, some people don't. Some people don't get legal representation. And some people, I'm talking to several people right now that didn't ask for a lawyer, confessed and got slammed with something, hardcore, either death or life without. It's hard to say how you handle that because it's all up to, law enforcement and the people that are doing the arrest. But there's no consistency in the prison system. There's no consistency in our justice system. Like, it should be nationwide. If you commit this crime, you get this. I was talking to a guy the other day. He was arrested for rape and kidnapping. Let me just say this. Kelly doesn't know this. I'm doing a research project with real estate agents. So I'm focusing on real estate agent attacks, and I'm interviewing dozens of people that have killed and raped real estate agents, and that's been a new crime. And I was just talking to one guy. He's like, yeah, I raped and kidnapped the agent, but I didn't kill her. And if I would have killed her, I would have had less time than I have now. I should have killed her. So there needs to be we need to somehow get this justice system where if you do this crime, that's what you get, and it's across the board. I don't know if that'll ever happen because people cut deals all the time, but I think it would be a fair way to approach this system and, maybe get people the help they need.
Love listening to this podcast. Well, we love that you are here to listen. Do you ever wonder what it's like to create a listening experience like this week to week?
Do your friends always tell you that you should have a podcast? Well, now is your chance. Our podcast network, Podcast One, is looking for the next podcast star. Do you think it could be you?
Enter the Self-Made Podcast competition now to find out. All you have to do is visit launchpad1.com/selfmade for a chance to win a contract with Podcast One valued at over $100,000 in promotion and so much more. Enter now until September 3rd and tell all of your friends to listen and download.
Go to launchpad1.com/selfmade to find out more. See official rules and sign up for your chance to win. That's launchpad1.com/selfmade. What are some of the biggest myths about teen killers and serial killers, in your opinion?
Well, the biggest myth is killers look like killers, which they don't. And one of the things I try to beat into my audience when I do my trainings is killers don't look like killers. So here's the 3 points I make. Killers don't look like killers anymore. They look like normal people. There's no more routine calls, stops for law enforcement, no more routine calls, no more routine meetings. But number 3, the big one is a lot of people don't really care to live. Like, a lot of people don't have a reason to live. And if we take that and start treating people like our neighbors the right way, you may eliminate some of these crimes because I've seen people taunt their neighbors and then they get murdered, right? So the biggest myth is killers look like killers, and we have to break that because we watch the movies and we watch TV and we think these killers look like in the book. But when it comes to serial murder, there's like 10 myths that I talk about, and a lot of them are pretty in-depth and they're detailed about MOs and signatures and all this stuff. The biggest myth about serial killers is most serial killers are not white males. Like, the number one profile of a serial killer is white male in their mid to late 20s. Okay? If you use that profile today, you will arrest 7% of serial killers. You will miss 93%. And the reason is most serial killers are actually black males in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. So things have changed drastically. That's the biggest myth, and that's something I'm really aggressive with because we are hunting for the wrong people when searching for serial killers. And a lot of these serial killers are killing many more people. So if you look at it, Charles Manson killed nobody. Son of Sam killed 6. BTK killed 10. Dahmer killed 17. Then we move over to the black male serial killers. Sam Little killed 93. I believe Carl Watts killed 120. But many of them have killed 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 victims. And the reason is they're never suspected. They fly under the radar, and they get away with these crimes. So that's the biggest myth. There's 9 more where that comes from, but that's the biggest, and people just don't believe it. So when I say that, people say, oh, you mean they're gang members? We don't count gang members. We don't count hitmen. We don't count bank robbers. We don't count the mafia. These are people that love killing, and they enjoy it, and they kill solely for the reason to kill. 60% of serial killers are black, 31% are white, 8% are Hispanic, and 1% are Asian. That was the numbers for the last 2 decades.
And did you have a running theme on the why?
The why, I mean, over the last 40 years, it's been slowly changing, but there's a lot more family breakdown in the urban areas. There's a lot of anger. Racism's part of this. Drugs are part of it. Drugs play a big role. And you've seen a rising, the black male serial killer come out of a lot of these urban areas. It's been an unbelievable phenomenon watching this, but it's not going to get any better. And I think it's going to continue the trend where every serial killer I see in the last, week after week is a black male. And then the new profile is black male shooting people. We've just had several arrested in the last few weeks. So it is a new trend.
You know what makes me nervous for society is, I grew up 20, 30 years, but much of that in local news and then full-time in national crime reporting. And you would think that I've seen it all and heard it all. And I can tell you with certainty that the level of savagery has increased. And I mean, I think everything I've seen and covered is the most horrific thing, the mind-boggling, right? But I've noticed that it continues to get even worse and worse. And it's something that you couldn't even make up. It's hard to believe that it's real life and people are capable of these things. And I see the violence increasing. I think the urge to act out in a violent way is increasing. Maybe it even starts verbally or online, which is a new thing, and then evolves. I see more random acts of violence, and I don't see a way to slow it down or divert the attention. I mean, and you would think a pandemic would unite humanity, but it's just everyone seems so angry and like they're just all becoming shittier and shittier people. Are you noticing that as well, Kelly or Phil? I mean, just as a complete breakdown of society getting worse?
I mean, I definitely do. I think people resort to violence very quickly today. It starts on social media, like you said. I mean, people are nasty on social media, but it sometimes evolves into violence on the streets. There's a lot of attacks, a lot of assaults. There's a lot of racism going on in many directions out there. And I never understood judging someone by their skin color. I've never been that type of person, but there are a lot of people like that. But, the uptick of teen violence is happening right now. And a lot of it has to do with people don't have a reason to live anymore. We've made life not even valuable anymore with our entertainment and the way we raise kids. And, the dignity and the value of life is gone. So we are seeing an increase in homicide, especially in our urban areas, in our big cities, and a huge increase in suicide among young people. And I don't really see an end to this.
Actually kind of brings me into my next topic and question. People ask me personally a lot, how do you do this every day? How do you work in crime every single day with so much death and destruction and despair and desperation? And, I say, I can look at crime scene photos all day long. Just don't make me go to the dentist. It's one thing I can't do. Don't make me go. And I think a lot of the time is, and Phil, I would like your opinion on this. We as journalists and you as an expert have to find ways to turn it off, I think, at the end of the night and not, let it get into your everyday life, not quote unquote, take it home with you. Melissa and I were just talking about this last night because we had a full day of interviews yesterday and we were like, we just need to do something where, shut our brains off for a while, whether it be a movie or I like cooking shows or going to play golf. So what do you do to not take it home with you?
I get that question a lot. Let's say, how do you sleep at night? After looking at all that stuff, I say, in my underwear with the fan on, it's actually pretty easy. I mean, when I'm done speaking, I don't think about this again until I speak again. I mean, it doesn't stay with me. I guess it's just our calling. It's what we're designed to do. I'm a very spiritual person. I believe that's part of it. There are people that work in child porn, kiddie porn. I could not do that. There are people that work with kids who are being molested. I can't do that either. There's things that I could not do, and I wouldn't sleep well at night. But for some reason, this particular thing is what I'm here for, and I believe it's what I'm on the earth for. So when you find something that's your mission and your calling, I guess you're able to deal with it. It does make me a little more condition yellow, like aware of my surroundings. It makes me more of a crime prevention minded person. But, these things do not haunt me. I do not dream about them. It does not affect me. So it would affect other people probably, but just not me.
I have to agree with you, Phil. I mean, it's definitely, I have that situational awareness now of not being a victim since working in this business for the last 20 years. And I see things differently in people. And I try to educate a lot of my friends and family on what they can do to keep themselves safe.
But also, I'm more present and I appreciate life more. Do you too have that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's both.
I will never be engaged in pettiness. You come to me with something petty, I'm done, And it's just, I think because of working in a field of death and that life can be taken so quickly that there's certain things I won't tolerate in my world because of that. Do you guys ever feel that you are choosing people in your universe differently now?
I mean, we're all on social media. I'm going to go back to what I think Melissa said, is it all starts in social media. And I've just kind of got to the point where I'm not fighting with people anymore. I'm not into disagreements. I'm not into drama. Same thing with my neighbors. You kind of get to the point where you realize life is precious and valuable. And I don't have time to get involved in these kind of disputes. But a lot of people spend their days doing that. And they have like I told you, they have no idea how dangerous this is. I show a video in my training. This couple was having a dispute while they're shoveling snow, and it turns into a double homicide. They're taunting the neighbor, calling him names, flipping him off, and he comes over and shoots both of them and kills them. I mean, then he goes and kills himself. See, and I tell my training, the mistake that couple made is they thought that guy had a reason to live, and he didn't.
Well, and even just look at the shooting recently that happened in Southern California with a road rage incident that killed the child in the car seat in the back of the car. I mean, it's awful. It should never have escalated to that.
But people are so angry that it does. And so we all do this for a living. We realize how things can go south. And so we try not to put ourselves in those situations. We end up having very small circles and just kind of living a pretty private life. And that's what you do. It's just not like it used to be 30, 40, 50 years ago.
And you said something a little chilling to me is, we don't know if the person before us overreacting or igniting this abnormal level of emotion, it has a reason to live. And how sad is that? But I wholeheartedly agree it's time to start thinking about those things and trying to put ourselves in the place of someone's mindset. And why would you react if someone is already coming at you in an abnormal way? But it's a sad time right now is where you have to worry about, does this person have a reason to live? And would the finger normally give a person reason to blaze and start, riddling bullets into somebody's car? It's so sad. But yeah, that's the world we are in, and we're here to take a look at it and share these stories. And you also connect, and humanity learns from tragedies, and that's a big part of it, right? We all learn from tragedy.
And I go to restaurants, I go to bars. I've never had an incident where I'm in a fight or in a situation. A lot of it is how you carry yourself and how you treat other people. I always treat people fair and the same as I would want to be treated. I think if you just live your life like that, the chance of having an incident goes down tremendously.
So I want to talk about Where the Bodies Are Buried, your podcast. I was reading an article about you that you actually had one or two or more of the convicted confess to you and only you of where additional bodies were buried. Is that how you came to name your podcast, or how were you already operating when someone confesses this information? How does that go down? To
be honest with you, I wanted the podcast to be called My Friends Are Monsters, but our company decided it was called Where the Bodies Are Buried, which puts a lot of pressure on somebody like me that I have to find bodies. But good news is we have had a lot of serial killers confess, and we are working on looking for bodies even as we speak. So we're looking for bodies in Illinois. We're looking for a body in Texas, and we're working on several cold case confessions in Indiana. So we are working on a lot of these cases. Season 2 is dropping next month, and we have a lot more interviews and confessions coming. So, yeah, we're working closely with law enforcement, mostly trying to find remains because the killers have confessed and are leading us to the remains.
Can you give us any teasers for season 2?
Wow, season 2. We have a guy named Paul Runge. It looks like Runge, R-U-N-G-E. He's never talked before. He's a very violent serial killer from Illinois, and we just finally got him to talk. We have cold case confession again in Indiana from William Clyde Gibson. We talked to a couple survivors of Ted Bundy. That's a great episode. They've never talked before, which is huge. We talked to a serial killer that nobody knows called the Soul Sucker. When he killed someone, he actually sucked the soul out of them as they died. So that was incredible.
Sorry, I had to take pause on that. And also,
I just got a visual of that.
Yeah, I was visualizing it. Does he lean? Did he lean over and inhale? But they're breathless. I mean, what?
Did he inhale their last breaths?
We'll have to tune in.
As they breathed their last breath, he put his mouth on there and sucked in. He felt like their soul, and he fell on his backside and defecated. And he said, "I knew I sucked their soul out." I mean, these are the kind of things we're going to be doing in season 2.
Okay. Well, wow. I'm sorry. I know we're running out of time, but one quick question. Do you think killers are born that way? Or, as far as being bred early on and showing signs early on, is there some kind of mental gene? I guess not. When I say born that way, I mean a mental or lacking a mental gene to show perhaps empathy and stuff,
I think unless you're born mentally ill, which is possible, right? Unless you're born mentally ill, I think serial killers are not born, but they're made. I think it's something to do with their upbringing. Something happens to them as children. There's an incident that goes down that changes the way they think. And most of the killers I talk to are made and not born.
Phil, thank you so much. Where can people check out your podcast, your book, and more information on you?
So if you go to philchalmers.com, that's Grand Central, philchalmers.com. There's 2 things I encourage people to check out. The books are fine, but to listen to the podcast Where the Bodies Are Buried, and anywhere you can listen to your podcast. And go to my YouTube channel, Phil Chalmers on YouTube, and you could actually watch me interview teen killers, school shooters, family annihilators, and serial killers live on YouTube.
Thank you, sir. You are great.
Phil, always a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Follow Killer Genes on Facebook and on Instagram. It's at Killer Genes, the podcast.
Also, be sure to like and subscribe to Killer Genes on Podcast One, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts.